Indeed, the Special Peace Envoy from Japan to Sri Lanka, Yasushi Akashi, said, a devolution package on which the government of Sri Lanka had been exerting considerable efforts must be drafted as soon as possible and be offered to the relevant parties, including the Tamil Tigers. Now, of course, that's no longer open as an option. The Tamil Tigers functionally have ceased to exist within Sri Lanka as an organisation, but the principle, considerable efforts must be drafted as soon as possible and be offered to relevant parties, including representatives of the Tamil people. Interestingly, Australia's own Foreign Minister has just very recently visited Sri Lanka. And what did he say? What did he go to talk about? To say, we have a political problem in Australia with asylum seekers. Please do something about stopping these people from getting on boats. Tighten up your border protection policies. I mean, this is utterly extraordinary. What I find unbelievable about this visit is that he did not mention, certainly not in public, but my understanding is not even private, the reason why Tamils feel compelled to get on boats, to take a perilous journey across a dangerous ocean. And we know people who take these trips, half of them don't ever make it. Why would you do that if you were not in fear of your life? Why would you do it if you were not so utterly desperate, so completely bereft of hope for your homeland, that you felt compelled to get on a boat and seek a new home elsewhere? Did Stephen Smith say, let's address the problem? No, he said, we need to put a band-aid around the problem. We need to stop the leakage. We don't need to address the issue at hand. So, the question arises, if the international community can take a bit more action, and I think there is a growing movement now for that, and if Australia could show some moral courage, I think for the first time in very many years, perhaps we could see a shift in the way in which the government in Sri Lanka addresses these types of issues. I'm not hopeful. I think that the sense of victoriousness, of joyousness at the military victory in Colombo at the moment probably precludes any meaningful dialogue over a political settlement. But with sufficient pressure, I do believe it's possible. And indeed, that is what we saw in Indonesia in 2005, when the Indonesian military believed that it had the Free Aceh movement on the ropes, and the military victory was all but utterly secured. And the international community stepped in, and I was there at the time, I know this happened. The international community stepped in and said to both sides, to both parties, to the Indonesian government, to the Indonesian military, start to negotiate, find a sustainable political solution to this problem. If you do not, we will withdraw aid at a time when we need it. And you know what? The Indonesian government listened, and in 2005 there was a resolution to the conflict, and Aceh is now an autonomous province. I'm not trying to suggest that Sri Lanka is like Indonesia. I'm not trying to suggest that Ilam is like Aceh, but there are parallels. Yes, the military conflict is over, perhaps only for the time being. Certainly, if there is not a sustainable political resolution to the problems in Sri Lanka fairly soon, I believe the conflict is again likely. Perhaps not in the form that it once took, where you had two conventional armies facing each other, but perhaps again taking more the form of what's publicly referred to as terrorism. And this, I would come back to the documentary, the movie Battle of Algiers, in which a so-called terrorist was asked by an incredulous journalist, why do you put bombs in baskets? And the so-called terrorist replied, you give us your helicopters and your gunships, and we'll give up our baskets. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Damien. As Damien said, one of the disturbing aspects of Australian politics is the way very serious issues in the region, very serious issues of politics in the Asian and South Asian region get reduced to votes and people on votes. And of course we have a vote at the moment, in fact it's an Australian government vote, the Ocean Triangle, which is the object of our attention. And ideally placed to address this. David Manns, Coordinator, Principal Solicitor, and indeed the Migration Agent with the Refugee and Immigration Legal Centre here in Melbourne. David.
Thanks very much. And can I just express my gratitude to the organisers for putting so much effort into it, and for the opportunity to speak tonight at this important forum which really is addressing one of the core human rights questions of our time, human rights in Sri Lanka, and the question that I'll be addressing in particular of territorial and extraterritorial protection, which has hit our shores so heavily again. I want to provide a snapshot of issues relating to refugees and asylum seekers from Sri Lanka and Australian government responses to Tamil asylum seekers. These are, of course, immense and complex questions. Time permits only a quick sketch of those issues, but I want to address three key matters. Firstly, why are so many people from Sri Lanka, including Tamils, seeking and indeed being given refugee protection under an international human rights treaty? Beyond the unfortunate and mistaken myth-peddling about economic refugees, what is the reality of refugee protection for Sri Lankan nationals? Or put simply, why are people getting on boats? Secondly, I want to address the Australian Government's recent response to spontaneous boat arrivals within our territory. How do we treat these often desperate and traumatised people, and how are their claims for protection examined? And thirdly, the Australian Government's current, if I could call it evolving response to Sri Lankan asylum seekers in the region. In particular, the current and future shape of what I would describe as Australia's Southeast Asian solution. And really a bit of my talk, frankly, is aimed at some basic myth busting. I think the times dictate. So let me turn to the first issue. Why so many people from Sri Lanka, why so many people from Sri Lanka have invoked an international treaty as a remedy to their plight? I refer, of course, to the Refugees Convention, a post-Second World War treaty framed in the aftermath of the Holocaust and associated totalitarian horrors. Good. I won't be using PowerPoint. In looking at the question afresh in the current context, something that struck me is how recent portrayals in the public discourse would leave one with the impression that there's some